Hi, welcome to a very casual February wrap-up. If you're new here, I theme my reading months, and this month was the month of standalones. March is the month for smashing my TBR, so if you want to see what I'm reading in March, I do have a TBR takedown video, but today I'm going to be talking about everything I read in February. I know it is the 12th of March, and this video is coming very late, and I did just want to make a quick sort of update about life. I work for local government, and it's becoming increasingly apparent as the days are going on that coronavirus is a problem, a very disruptive problem. And for me, it's not a case of I work for a private business and I can work from home. I am a council employee. I have a duty of care to the constituents that live in my area, and there's been a lot of talk about redeployment to other areas. That is fine. I can work with that, but it might mean that I have less time to read and make videos. You know, I feel like I might have to put this on a bit of a back burner, which is not something that I want to do because I wanted to make 3 videos a week. But at this point, I don't know what's happening in my work life. I may be asked to work longer hours. I don't know. I don't know what's happening. And I think that's the problem with a lot of the countries. You just don't know what's happening. But I do imagine that redeployment for me would be very tiring, very taxing, and would take up a lot of my energy. But this is what I like to do, so I'm hoping that I'll still have the time to do that. So a month of standalones. I didn't enjoy it as much as I thought I was going to. It did give me sort of like a goal as something to work towards. I think I read 8 books. Oh no, I didn't. I read 6 books, which isn't very good for me, but some of these were really, really long. I did kind of like that I was able to get some books read that I hadn't read in a long time, and I wouldn't have picked them up had I not purely been reading standalones. So the first book that I read took me 8 days to finish, and it was Wanderness by Patrick Ness. Patrick Ness is one of my favourite authors. I know that's like really cliche, but he is. I think his writing style is absolutely perfect. The first book I read by his was A Monster Calls, and I've honestly never gotten over it. I want to read it again because it was so good, but I don't want to have that emotional reaction like I did last time again. More Than This wasn't as good as A Monster Calls or anything that I've read by his before, but I still rated it 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. It was a really long novel, if I remember right. It was like hundreds of pages long, like at least 500 pages long. And I felt in parts that it was a little bit slow, but essentially I loved the idea of the overall question of the plot being like, is there more to life than this? At the very root of this novel is the whole concept of loneliness, being on your own, not having the people that you love around you, having no one around you, and how you cope with that. In this novel, a boy drowns in a body of water and he dies, but he wakes up in a house that he used to live in when he was a child. And he moved from Britain to America, and he dies in America, and he wakes up in this house in Britain, but there's no one else there. I mean, he lives and walks around this area for days and weeks, and he just doesn't see anyone. I don't want to see too much about it because this book is best when you don't know a lot about it, and that's essentially all that it gives you in the blurb on the cover. Anything more than that is a bit of like a light bulb surprise moment, and that's what it's worth reading for, the surprises. But I would say this book is good for those that like novels that get really deep into exploring is there more to this, or what the meaning of life is, or alternative ways of understanding our humanity. I would recommend it. It did make me cry at one point. I'll put I think I recorded it actually, so if I have, I'll put a little montage in. The next book that I read was Birds Without Wings. I'm not going to try and pronounce the author's name because I don't want to butcher it. This was a book that I was highly anticipating reading because of its Goodreads rating. It was rated 4.16 on Goodreads, which is really, really high for a Goodreads book, and I rated it 3.75 stars to be precise. This book, again, epic novel. It's nearly 700 pages, but I felt like it was so slow in parts. It could have works so much better. I had about 300 pages chopped off. I say it's an epic novel because it covers such a long time scale and many characters. So it essentially is about a town in the Ottoman Empire. It's about the birth of modern Turkey and how that all comes about, and it follows the characters' lives in this town and what happens to them. So this town is a mix of Christians and Muslims and other religions, and they live together so peacefully. However, war is coming and it's driving them apart. It follows the lives of children who are best friends but are of different religions, and how they grow up into adulthood and the events that shape their friendship and their love life and their careers and where they end up. There is a subplot though that runs throughout the novel, and it is the story of how the first president of Turkey becomes the president of this new regime. That bit, it was interesting from a historical standpoint because I didn't really know about the birth of modern Turkey. I would say I only find it interesting because I do have a history degree, but I did find that a bit monotonous and not as enjoyable, so I did find that I was like skipping those chapters, and quite a lot of it is very much dedicated to war. So again, for me, I don't particularly like enjoying reading about war, so that was the bit I found to be quite dull, which brought the whole thing down. But there are a few characters where I absolutely loved them, and I loved reading about their story and how it ended, and it was all so tragic, and it did tie up a lot of loose ends, and that's what I liked about it. I'm still unsure on whether I would recommend this, but I would like to read more by this author. My next read was Innocent Traitor by Alison Weir. This was a book that I've had for probably the longest time, for about 8 years, and I've just never got around to reading it. Once it started, it was a quick read, but again, I thought like 100 pages could have been chopped out of this, although I do commend the author on taking such a dull historical event and turning it into an interesting plot. This book is about the life and very short reign of Lady Jane Grey. For those of you that don't know, Lady Jane Grey was a child who was placed on the throne for 9 days, like that's all she was queen for, after the death of Henry VIII's son. So Henry VIII dies, and his son Edward, I think it's Edward, I'm doing this all off the top of my head, becomes king. He dies quite young due to illness. However, Henry VIII has established the Church of England, and his son is very much embraces the Church of England and shrugs off Catholicism, and his heir is his sister Mary, who is Henry VIII's daughter with his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, and Mary is very strictly very Protestant and wants to do away with the Church of England apparently, and Edward doesn't want that. And it's all about the events that lead up to Lady Jane becoming queen, because he's manipulated in trying to preserve the Church of England. Like I said, boring events, but the author does make it interesting. It also ties in very nicely with some of Philippa Gregory's novels that follow Elizabeth I, because Elizabeth I's childhood and Lady Jane Grey's childhood actually sort of like cross over for a while. They both live in the same place for a couple of years, and some drama happens there. So it was a nice tie-in with Elizabeth I. I would recommend this to fans of Philippa Gregory novels and those who are interested in British history, because Lady Jane Grey, she's an important figure of the Tudor period but is always overlooked, as never existing. So yeah, did enjoy it, but it could have been shorter. The next book that I read was Last Night in Montreal by Emily St. John Mandel. I rated this 3.5 stars on Goodreads. It was okay. It wasn't anything like very memorable. Like Station 11, her novel as well, very memorable, would read that again, and I've kept Station 11 in case I want to reread it, but this one I wouldn't reread. It's quite a short novel, but it sort of wraps up everything that it needs to. It's very well detailed. The main character, Lilia, is living with her boyfriend. They've only been together like a short time, but she's moved in with him, and she goes shopping and she doesn't come back, and he decides that he wants to find out what's happened to her or find out where she's gone. However, Lilia was also the victim of kidnapping when she was a child by her dad. So when she was a small child, her dad in the middle of the night encouraged her to leave the house and he kidnapped her. And the mum goes on telly to sort of like start this whole campaign to find her, but her dad and her just go on the run and they just sort of like drive around the US, and she's always, because she's grown up like that, that's the sort of life that she leads. She moves about a lot. So the whole plot is about, you know, will this guy who's very much determined to find her, will he find her? What will happen if he does find her? Where is she? What is she doing? And also, what are the circumstances surrounding her childhood and being kidnapped by her dad? It does have quite a shocking outcome, which did keep me wanting to read more. So I would recommend. The next book was Stoner by John Williams. I rated this 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. This book was published in 1965 and it is the most monotonous, monotone book that I've ever read, but I enjoyed it. William Stoner is a character who's born at the end of the 19th century. His dad is a farmer, he lives on a farm, and he is being trained by his dad into basically taking over from him and becoming a farmer. Although his dad is approached to say, you know, there's a new university program that will train people into becoming better farmers. So the dad encourages that he goes to university to study farming. However, William Stoner, once he gets to university, realises that he doesn't like the course he's doing, but he likes to learn. So he's going to change course and he ends up changing to English. He finishes university, he gets a wife, he lives with his wife, and he gets a job. And he lives the most monotonous life. But at the same time, it's so entertaining because you feel for him so bad. In many ways, he is the average person. He has an unhappy marriage. He is in love with someone that he can't have. He has a child where there's tension between him and his wife about their relationships with the child. And he has problems at work. And I can't pinpoint what it is about this novel that I really liked, but the whole way through I just felt like Stoner was such a fair guy and I wanted him to have a great outcome, which he may or may not have had. But I would love to talk to more people about Stoner. I can totally see why this is a classic. So if you've read it and want to discuss, let me know in the comments. And the last book that I read is Vox. I've only kept it on me at the moment because I haven't gone to the shop where I trade books in yet, but I will be getting rid of this. This one I rated 3 stars on Goodreads. I actually thought that this novel started out really strong. I'd read The Power in the month previously in January and I really didn't like it, and they do have very similar plot concepts, so I'm really pleased that I like this one more than The Power. However, it started out really, really strong. I love the concept. So the concept is that women are seen as being second-class citizens again, more so than what they are now. Men go to school, they're taught about Christian values. Women go to school and they're sort of like taught like home economics. However, women also wear bracelets that limit the amount of words that they can speak to 100 a day. And when they go over this limit, they start getting shocked more and more and more until eventually, like, you know, they're shocked to death. This also applies to young children, girls as well. So from the minute that they are born, they essentially can only speak 100 words a day. The main character is a very smart woman and she is a professional who's looking for a cure for dysphagia before she's told that she needs to stop working. And this is set like a couple of years after they've introduced this scheme. And her own young daughter has never lived in a time that she could speak freely. Dysphagia, if you don't know, is a brain disorder where you find it hard to form sentences and speak the correct words for what you want to describe. Someone in my family has dysphagia and I really like that they use that in this. It sort of like brought a little bit more awareness to it because I wouldn't have known what dysphagia was had I not known someone with it. The main character has a husband who seems a bit nonchalant about it all and she gets really angry and she starts to resent her husband because he seems to just be happy going along with this regime. And she also has teenage sons who, the eldest one is 16 and he very much believes in what he's been taught at school, and he believes in the regime and that women shouldn't be speaking, and he sort of sees himself as like on a pedestal above her, but she can't accept that because he's her son, so she doesn't like her son either. And I thought like that was a really good, interesting plot line. However, halfway through the novel, the president is diagnosed with dysphasia, and the government come to her and say, we will take your bracelet off, we'll take your counter off, and you can speak freely if you come and work for us in developing a cure for dysphasia. At that point, it introduced new characters, and the rest of the novel seemed to be pretty much set in a lab, where her and her team are trying to work on a cure. And that's where it sort of got really dull and boring for me. They do add a little bit more, and they do reveal some plot surprises and some twists and turns, but I just didn't like any of the characters enough to be invested in it. The main character herself gets embroidered in something halfway through, which I totally disagree with. And when I finished, I was just kind of like, meh. I didn't care what happened to any of the characters, or that they lived or died or did what. It would have been so much better had there been characters that you actually rooted for, but I didn't root for anyone. Bit of a disappointing read, but it had a very strong start, but I can imagine a lot of people would like this. So they are the books that I read in February. Like I said at the start, I'm sorry for just not being enthusiastic or into, or very like checked in today. It's just been a hard day, and I feel like the days are only going to get harder and harder. So I will hopefully see you in the next video. I hope it's not too far away, and I hope everyone else as well. Bye!